I got added to a pagan group called Coven of Witches. And first post that kind of stood out to me because I was going through like, why was I added to this? Because now I'm kind of stuck with Facebook because the homeschool group we belong to is moving their shit to Facebook because Meetup costs money. So one of the groups we belong to is moving to Facebook. Since I don't get all my, I don't get any of them. I don't get any of my notifications because of the hack thing where, yeah. So I get to deal with all the drama that comes with all these people. You run into it surprisingly a lot with pagan groups. It's a private group, so don't go looking for it. Most pagan groups are because bad things happen. So to make it private and then say, let's get this group active again, please add people you think would love this group. Okay, so before I read this is something that I do to feel things out. It is a way of demonstrating and declaring our values and the way that we live. It's also a way of feeling out whether or not somebody is a special snowflake who can't handle reality and thus is not really capable of rationally following the path of harm none, because they will shield themselves from the reality to avoid dealing with any ill that comes of their actions or their lack of caution. So this will be filled with a couple things that, after my response under it, she deleted the whole thing. I don't even know if I was blocked yet, so I'm just going to read it now. Because that happens sometimes if you test people. They just don't withstand the test. The point, it would be pointless if they knew that you were testing them. It's all true, of course. But, and it's actually very watered down, so that it's not like going to put somebody in therapy or something. So this is my response to it. I'd advise asking first. Most of us get spontaneously added to groups without being asked, which is common courtesy. People who follow the revived neo-paths and people who follow the old traditional paths that are passed down before the books that one guy wrote are two different things. They are. There's more caution in the old traditional paths than there are in the neo. So between Jen and I, she understands the caution because she's old enough to have seen enough things. But, some of the practices are a little bit more open. Whereas mine, she relates it a lot to being like the aunt who taught her some things, where you wouldn't know if you didn't know. Because, we lived and died by the 7 veils. And you wouldn't understand that unless you understood that. But it's actually a new-ish term. It's been called a lot of things. The neo-pagans call it that, though. More than anything. It's kind of one of the few terms that like both will kind of understand usually, unless they just don't know what they're talking about. So anyway, I'm just gonna keep reading. Are two different things. We have 2 pagans of the path of harm none in the house, but of 2 different backgrounds and traditions, even with some passed directly from a relative. In both cases, with one taking more from the neo stuff and one from the old an atheist who is with one of said pagans, and a Christian, one of less than a handful I've met in my life, who is truly accepting of people of other faiths without feeling threatened by their existence, or like they have to convert them, etc. There are some people who can pretend to be for a little while, but I'm talking about truly being this way and not just pretending. And a child who isn't taught anything but himself. We teach understanding and morals, not religion. If you want to choose that later, he can, and we'll love him no matter what he chooses or does not choose, etc. That said, while the other pagan in the house takes more from the neo-movement, I cannot honestly say either of us understand the notion of teaching children. Primarily because we don't understand. It's not we don't understand. Primarily because we understand it's like telling a child Santa is real, but with religion. They don't have the capacity to decide for themselves yet. Not until a certain age. There is actually a certain age that you can start teaching them, that it exists and the concept of acceptance and all this. But like in general, there's a difference between doing that and teaching a child religion. Teaching them to be understanding of people of different beliefs is a whole nother ball of wax. That's a bit different than like sitting them in Sunday school and saying, you have to believe this, or this is what our family believes, and telling them this is, what you're supposed to believe. There's a difference. So, primarily because we understand it's like telling a child Santa is real, but with religion. They don't have the capacity to decide for themselves yet. They will just believe what you tell them. I was let choose till my mother died, and this child will be whatever he wants to be one day, not anything anyone else tells him to believe. And we've taught him what a cult is by its format, not by what a certain church, etc. wants things to be defined as, not us. That's all that they would say growing up, not us. They wouldn't even talk about the definitions of cults. And I think that's because the pastor knew. Not us. Anytime something says that and avoids rational definitions for the term cult, but is just pointing fingers, that is some red flags right there. The church my grandmother made me go to was a cult, and I know that because rational definitions for a cult exist. Anyway, as a second degree who lost her coven shortly after, promotion to second degree due to treachery of then high priestess, and then I go into a brief explanation of the group. I don't name anybody in it, and I don't give any defining characteristics, except one was a dude. And actually, at one point, he was considered, loosely, because he was, the only dude. She kept on, saying that he was, he didn't want to be the high priest. He was still learning. So he was like, yeah, I'm still learning. And everybody else was like, yeah, sure, you're still learning. I was like, yeah, I mean, if he doesn't, I'm cool. It was pretty loose-knit. As far as groups go, pagans aren't about, groups that give any one member a lot of power over anyone else. It's just kind of a position of respect. And you earn that respect. If you lose that respect, you lose it. You have to keep on keeping it. So, I go into a brief explanation of that I don't actually want to read here. But to give the general gist, he left because of things that the high priestess did. Another person who was loosely affiliated with our group physically removed the high priestess from my apartment after she admitted what she did to me. And then afterwards, I was enlightened to some of the things that she had done to the male in the group, which were horrible, by the way. So I was this lady's apprentice, and she raised me to second degree whenever I told her I didn't want to be. Like, I'd already, like, reset myself, and I'd already been raised before. And I just wanted to keep studying and broadening my knowledge base before being considered, because I couldn't consider myself. You know, I wanted to be able to consider myself more advanced before then. If anybody does that in any religious group, that should be a red flag. Pagans are not immune to having bad experiences with other pagans. I think some people get into it thinking that it's all sunshine and rainbows, but people aren't all sunshine and rainbows, so nothing is. Christians are just a little extra because they're literally taught from a young age that everything that isn't them is the enemy, and it's not. Most, for all the shit that happens because people are people and people are shitty, not all people are shitty. You just have to find the ones that aren't. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to keep reading. I don't think everyone appreciates being volunteered for groups without asking. We all have our own histories and our own traditions. My ancestors lived and died by what some of you may call the Dance of Seven Veils. The only reason I'm not an atheist is because I experienced things science cannot yet explain. At some point, a couple sharks pushed me out of a riptide. We were visiting back east. I was holding onto my cousin's boogie board, and I actually got yelled at later as if I meant to end up miles down the beach. It was quite a ways anyway. At least it felt like miles to me. It was quite a ways, and I was brought back. And the lady who pulled me out of the water actually argued with my grandparents after going, "You're a natural," that sort of weird reaction thing. And I didn't even know what a natural was. My mom had never told me. So the only reason I'm not an atheist is because I experienced things science cannot yet explain. At some point, a couple of sharks pushed me out of a riptide, and from not being able to see the beach anymore to the beach, and yeah, I was that far out. And another time, a bear walked between me and gunshots. It was actually 2 bears, but I didn't want to go into it and say that a baby bear died, and then their mom got mad. Which resulted in the bears' deaths, but not me. Spooked those superstitious assholes, though. Grandmother and her friend trying to erase me as a child. Yeah, her friend was actually the one holding the gun. It was some lady with curly hair. He was brown-ish, like it had been dyed. She was an older lady. But then that would basically describe a lot of people, so I was drugged, okay? I couldn't give a clear explanation of that. So let's be clear. I'm familiar with the practices of those who burn down homes of pagans, etc. And yeah, I am. Even so, when I was younger, I was more out about it, wearing my pentacle openly. It was also sort of a weird defiance against this sort of thing that I had been through whenever I was younger. I got some broken windows for it, too. These days, I just try to avoid conflict with people who cannot be reasoned with by not doing that. It was naive of me to think that could be, or that there were more people that could be than who can not be. That said, some people pretend to be someone they're not online, and sometimes there are nefarious reasons for it, and sometimes there aren't. You don't know. And I've actually seen this a lot in the groups against the family court corruption. So, and you'll see it in more than religious groups. You'll see it everywhere, basically. So if you want a group like that to be mindful of what you post, please. I have no idea who added me to this group. It doesn't seem like a bad group, but please be mindful in how you practice. Some of the young ones might take that very generous offer to add everyone in a way that would allow for them to invite family, etc., and not take into account how their family's views could lead to harm to anyone in the group. My father is dead because of such people. I lost and endured vandalism, etc. I lost friends and endured vandalism. I forgot to say the word friends. I know someone else where the sole reason they lost their kids was claiming them being pagan faith made them guilty of hostile environment for their children. Just religion, nothing else. A perfect world where everyone can get along would be nice, but it's not the world we live in. We live in an imperfect world where people still get hurt because of people who still use religion as an excuse to be shitty, horrible human beings. Who do endless harm. People, perhaps a note of caution could be encouraged in invitations. Younger members may be encouraged to invite people simply in hopes they will understand in some cases. This may do what they desire, and mean there is more understanding and less conflict about it. But in cases like mine back in the day, if I had done that, people would have found their homes burnt down on a good day. Maybe encourage thinking before doing. And to be clear, my grandmother did threaten to do that to someone just because I talked to her at school. And I had to act like I was completely a crazy person. Anyway, she said, not even, okay, so this is, she didn't even wait a full minute before posting. It was seconds after I posted. So, she didn't read it. But she posted, "You also forget that pagans aren't this uptight. If what I posted needed you to write a short soliloquy," I've never had to pronounce that word before. "Perhaps this isn't the group for you." And then I said, "That really depends," because she just did this right away. "You obviously didn't read it to be uptight enough to judge me, enough to call me uptight. Pot call kettle black, basically. A general caution only reminds young ones to consider. It does not restrict. It only cautions. After all, we don't know who was around them. They know better than you or I. I have experiences that taught me what could happen. Thank you for blanket terming pagans, just like the Christians, etc. do. Despite the fact pagan actually refers to many spiritual and religious paths, both named and unnamed. I follow a path of harm none. If there is a possibility of harm, I will avoid it if possible. Cautioning is not being uptight. It is sharing experience." Also, I went to go add to that, and unable to post comment. So I don't know if it's because, anyway, so I put, "And to be clear," this is the part that never got to be posted, "and to be clear, I've met pagans more uptight than a feral cat wanting to be left alone. So no, being pagan path does not automatically make people anything but what they are. It's not supposed to either." So the pagan paths don't actually dictate the same way as the Abrahamic paths, and if someone tries to, those are some red flags. But yeah, as far as, I'm just gonna refresh this, and if I've been blocked, okay. Have I been blocked? Oh, I was removed from the group. I don't think I was blocked though. But my posts were removed, and I was removed from the group because the lady who runs or is admin of the group, the sole admin, that doesn't indicate any sort of power tripping tendencies. anytime you see a group that only has one leader and it's got like, okay, so this group has 174 members, but there's only one admin. Anytime you see a group like that and nobody's like, hey, we need more admins, that's a red flag, because that is one person arbitrarily enforcing their view. Pagans in general don't tend to like large organized groups because it does have the potential to end up that way. Old traditionals actually are a little bit more specific about it, just because it kind of works. What? No, I'm still not changing my cover photo, because you wouldn't even let me, they won't even let you use photographs anymore. My cover is old. It is a picture of my kids. So, I'm not changing that shit. You can go fuck yourself, Facebook. Yep. Anyway, that stuff is gone. So, I'm just gonna read it just in case. Because I feel like it's important enough to say, regardless of whether or not one lady running a group thinks otherwise. I think it's hilarious because these groups will take in a bunch of kids who don't even know. They don't know what Harm None entails. They haven't studied. They don't know. The only thing that they have is the internet and what they can get off of it. And some of that is misinformation. Part of what you need to know is how to cross-reference your sources and make sure that it's not bullshit. Some of these people, they never learned that. So you end up with a group of people who's just sort of feeding off of each other's misconceptions. Mostly because it's one person on a power trip. So yeah. Traditionally, the role of the second degree is to do exactly what I just did. Be understanding of the younger members, but also, caution. And the job of there's another name for it, for the third degree. Sorry. Some people give it different names. So third degree is the most ambiguous way of putting it. But a lot of the neo-traditions would recognize Maiden Mother Crone. But just kind of call them elders. But then, you risk association with some weird shit. Mormons. I'll respect your existence as long as you respect mine. Basically, let's just leave each other alone there. A cult is a cult is a cult is a cult is a cult. It tells you how to think, what to believe. Or want your money, it's cults. If it's just like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be assholes, not necessarily telling you, but just the advice is just sort of there, that's what religion's actually kind of supposed to be. Yeah, that's not a cult. So me saying, hey, be careful because, do consider the people you're doing this to before you do this, before you invite them, yeah. The funny thing is that I was actually a long-standing member of the group. I didn't say I was added recently. I just typically kept my mouth shut. It's funny because the first time that I opened my mouth, yeah. Do you understand why this group isn't active? No? Okay. It's actually pretty funny, because I actually know why the group died. And in part, it was because we don't like that shit. I mean, I haven't been active lately because I haven't even been on Facebook, but now I'm on Facebook because I kind of have to be. I hate Facebook. But Facebook makes it pointedly harder to find other social networking. So I'm on Minds. But yeah. I'm on Minds. But I wish Minds made it easy to like just make groups. Because I hate Facebook and I couldn't suggest Minds to them in hopes that they would go there, and now it's just happening and nobody's gonna want to change once they do it. Human behavior. The Dance of Seven Veils, by the way, is like where I didn't technically lie to the person that I let think that I was crazier than a squirrel without nuts or something. Yeah. In high school, yeah, that would be an example. Because I didn't actually lie to her. What I did was I told the truth very creatively without actually telling her, oh, and by the way, someone wants to kill you. And your family. And has threatened to burn it down with you all inside. Yeah, I didn't tell her that. But I went into all sorts of crap about the things that my grandmother had said, and I put things in a very fantastical way. And she almost caught it too.